Well, thank you for staying with us this morning. First conversation is around fostering cooperation among security agencies. That's something that's been so much talked about. More than once has the president himself mentioned the fact that there is a need for security agencies to collaborate so that we can have a safer environment than we have had in time past. This morning, Onyekachi Adekoya joins us. He is a security consultant. He joins us here in the studio. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Mike Ejiofor, who is a former DSS official and now a security consultant. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ejiofor.
Thank you.
Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Adekoya. This is not a conversation that is strange to you. It's not something that you're hearing for the first time. And one of the conversations we've had before, you've talked about the fact that we have more than 10 security agencies. First of all, you may want to try to speak to what security or collaboration gaps have you seen that have made our security, should I say, infrastructure vulnerable?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. In terms of the agencies, I think the first gap is the seeming overlapping roles that each agency is supposed to play. That's the first major gap. And some will argue that some of the framers of the law are quite deliberate in how they frame the language. If you say the Constitution is a grand norm upon which every agency, which is a product of the National Assembly's Act, if you say they draw their power from the grand norm, then if the language is a bit skewed, then every other thing you see will follow that line. So, for example, the power of arrest. We'll start with that. The power of arrest. First, every citizen has the right and the power to make a civil or civilian arrest. Then you then begin to go to, say, the police, which should be the major internal security agency that we interface with. The rest should not be seen. They should be felt. But you see, those ones that should be felt and not seen want to be seen because they also have the power of arrest. And in some overlapping language, if you say, for example, the DSS is to detect and prevent, okay, within the remit of detecting and preventing, you know, they allowed certain actions because the clause is a bit omnibus. So the language, again, the language, the requirements of the security function also makes it somewhat a bit open-ended. But that's where we start from in terms of where the gaps will be. The second, yes.
I just want to, don't forget that second point and other points that you want to make. But, okay, go ahead.
No doubt. So the second point is because security is a very sensitive issue, and we say that certain things, the language is certain things about security should be kept a bit under the wraps for security reasons, which is true to an extent. But if security is also public service, there are some things that will also be common knowledge. So within that space, we leave certain things open-ended because you need to give the persons responsible some latitude to be able to act, to combat some threats in the interest of the country, which is why your security vote is never open-ended in any case. So you start from the framing and the powers given to each agency. Then you then look at the political nature of the role. Once you climb to the summit or the peak of your maybe your career in a particular service, at the position of DG, maybe DSS or Inspector General of Police or the Chief of Army Staff or the Chief of Defense Staff, that role is more of a political position than a technocrat's position. Because appointment into those offices are solely at the discretion of the number one political office holder. So you climb to that summit.
The president.
Yes, the president, which is in this case President Muhammadu Buhari. So then you are all a political appointee of the president. So you live, as it were, to please the president. You are no longer that career person that would be able to call a spade a spade. You have to be careful in that office.
raising more questions as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
But I'm coming there. But there was something you said earlier, which I wanted to quickly take you on for, which was that the agencies of security that weren't supposed to be seen want to be seen.
Yes.
Question is why?
No, that is the second point I was trying to make. And if you had allowed me, I would probably have touched on it.
Please.
But it's a good point you raise it again. Because of the political nature of the role, people want to be seen to be doing their job. Now, funny though, there's something called eye service in our own industry. You want to work and you want to be seen to be working. So if you don't
So
have...
that you can get the credit.
Exactly. Or then you can retain some patronage.
But Mr. Adekoya, if you work in the secret service, you are not supposed to be seen or heard.
Which is the point I'm making.
Your work is secret. We're not even supposed to know that you work for the secret service. So if you want to be seen and you want to be heard, you've already leaked your cover.
Not necessarily. So this first thing is not to disparage the good work, because there are a lot of thorough professionals in the service. Now, it is the political nature of the leadership role that I'm speaking to, which is why sometimes you see this interagency rivalry coming to the fore. Now, recall that before this new set of service chiefs came into office, you had skirmishes between the Air Force, the Nigerian Army, some disagreements as to when to fly, when not to fly. You had call-outs for sorties or close air support. And again, the Air Force has its budget, as the Nigerian Army has its own budget. So for every sortie the Air Force executes, is executed on its own budget. So if the Air Force doesn't have the budget to support the on-ground requirements of the Army, you also have some limitation.
That's it.
Now, when you then have issue of seniority, no seniority at that level, which was pretty much what was plaguing the former service chief, you then begin to have some of these issues. But those issues are not there as at today, because the operational doctrine of the Chief of Defense Staff has been very clear. I don't want to go into the other issues, but the Nigerian Army seems to have a bit of a sense of entitlement, because the Air Force and the Navy are support, as it were, to the core Nigerian Army. So if you provide air support, you provide naval support. It's unstated rule, which is why you see that norm is that you see the Nigerian Army become predominantly appointees to the office of Chief of Defense Staff or or Minister of Defense, or certain key position, or the key coup plotters coming as a den from the Nigerian Army. So in normal sense, if you put some security council set up in a state, for some strange reason, it is assumed that the brigade commander in the state should be the most senior person because he's from the Nigerian Army. And then the DSS, the Navy, the police, Federal Road Safety Corps, the traffic, every other person should be, because...
One step below.
And that again impacts on the psyche of the nation, because we are not fully yet given into the doctrine of civil and civilian rule, which is an international accepted standard that says that every force must submit to the civilian leadership. So in any case, you can say if the governor of the state, who is a civilian, is the chairman of the Security Council, he in that case becomes the chairman and has the full powers. But just to make a point to say that there is the interagency rivalry which you speak of. There are, yes, parochial entrenched issues that throw this up and which would not go away anytime soon.
Okay.
There are issues of law and language of law that gives this agency overlapping powers. There are issues of the political nature of the position.
That political nature of the
Yes.
thing that you mentioned, you've repeated it quite a few times, and I'm wondering what it means. But we'll come there. And then there's a question Alero asked the other time. Maybe I should ask Mr. Ejiofor in his opening comments as well. You may want to speak to the question of the gaps the first question that I asked Mr. Adekoya, the gaps that necessitated this interagency rivalry over time. But then there's a question Alero asked Mr. Adekoya now, and I don't know if it's something you would like to speak to as well. Mr. Adekoya said, every agency that shouldn't be seen sometimes wants to be seen, not just because they want to be seen, but because they want to be seen to be doing their jobs. What's your take on that?
Well, I think I agree to some extent with what my good friend, happy to meet you again on the same station, Mr. Adekoya. The fact remains that even in advanced countries, there are rivalries. But to what extent does it affect the operations? In Nigeria, in third world countries, it's worse because you can see that most of the functions of the security agencies are interwoven. They're not clearly defined. So you see one overlapping the other. So there are no clear distinctions, even though we know that the police, for instance, is the statutory body charged with maintenance of internal security, while the SSS takes charge of collection of intelligence. Now, why has it been so difficult to control? You recall that in 2010, from 2010 to 2015, the rivalry was so much, even before then, until the State Security Service, for instance, established the National Institute for Security Studies, where all the major stakeholders, regulatory bodies, not just the security agencies, CBN, Air Force, everybody got involved. So you see, for now, we have more synergy. Because if you go to a state, for instance, you can see the commissioner of police, the brigade commander, and possibly correctional service, all being fellows of the Security Institute. So what do you expect? You expect them to work together because the curriculum of the service has also established that these people must work together. If we don't work together, there's no way we'll achieve result. Then on the issue of rivalry, like Mr. Adekoya said, most of these things are political. Political reasons, everybody wants to, like he said, everybody wants to impress on their point of who is the commander-in-chief. So everybody wants to take credit or glory to achievements with a bid to retaining and sustaining their position. So I think that's basically, the rivalry is basically political. Then on the issue of people who are not supposed to be seen are not, are they seen and they're seen now. That also, I think I can give you an example. I think it was about 2006 that because of some lapses in coordination between the SSS and the other security agencies, you give information, some of them will go and leak it. So then if I can remember correctly, the then DG, Mr. Gazama, now established an interventionist unit that when you have very sensitive issues to handle, instead of waiting for the police, waiting for the army they intervene. And you cannot just go on your own to intervene without being properly identified. Now you see there are criminals everywhere, you have robbers. So to distinguish the State Security Service from these other people who are operating illegally, they now inscribed the DSS, which is the Department of State Services. So that when you see them, you know that. So their interventionist unit, it's not that they carry out operations just regularly. When we have sensitive issues, they go out to intervene instead of waiting for the police and all that. But when it borders on police, when they get some of these suspects too, they hand over to the police to prosecute. In some cases, the one the SSS can prosecute, well, they go ahead. So that accounts for the visibility of the SSS in operations. Again, it's what they do in the SSS that is hidden, not the personnel. You have a brother, you know he works in the SSS. You have the SSS personnel, they have a relation, they have dependents. So it's not as if they don't know the operatives. In the US, for instance, you go to the CIA, I stand there, take picture, but you go to the White House, but in Nigeria, because of our level of development, you dare not get close to the villa to even talk of snapping pictures or go and stand in front of the SSS to stand. But we are developing and evolving, and I'm sure that very soon we'll get there since things are changing.
Well, there's a critical issue you just raised now, Mr. Jofor, and I think it is something worth addressing. You said everywhere there is we have interagency rivalry everywhere in the world, but how significantly does that impact on operations, which is the concern, to the point that you would also remember that at some point the president more than once came out publicly on national television speaking to heads of security agencies. You guys need to work together. You guys need to work together. And so one is wondering how to bridge the gap between that rivalry and the operations, as you talked about, because there are those who are wondering, first of all, how significantly does this impact on response time? You also talked about the fact that sometimes it is the job of one agency, but because the agency is not nearby enough, another one takes it up. How easily will that happen now if those gaps are not bridged as quickly as possible for the security and welfare of the people?
Well, I think there's a lot of improvement now between the heads of the various security agencies. But you can see that the rivalry, so to speak, does not go beyond it does not exist, or to some extent limited to at the management and leadership level of the security agencies. But they should also make this permit and go down the rank and file. Because if the various heads are working in collaboration, synergizing, and it doesn't go down, it does not achieve any result. I give you an example. When I was in Abia, for instance, as the state director, I made sure the CP, myself and the CP, and some other agencies will have periodic meeting involving the DPOs and all the security chiefs, like the SSS heads in the local governments are addressed. We will have regular meeting where we exchange ideas on how to improve our relationship and our operations, how to draw operational orders, logistic problem, which we put together and even discuss with the governor. It makes your work easier. But if you want to take it alone, you're going to have problems. In terms of logistics, you need to come together to at least approach the governor to ensure that you get the support, apart from the support being given from your national headquarters, because it can never be sufficient.
Mr. Adekoya, I'm wondering, you've raised the issue of the politics of it all as well, and perhaps sometimes in response, some of it in response to what Adara said earlier. I'm wondering why she's quiet, is because she seems to be taking it all in. Maybe she wants to take it to the National Assembly. But that I'm wondering the significance, or how significantly the appointments are politicized to the detriment, permit me to use that word, of the function of collaboration. Mr. Jofor spoke to something, I'm sure is something that you would also want, you also agreed with him because you were nodding as he was speaking about it. The fact that that collaboration at the top doesn't seem to percolate down to the ranks and files, the lower rungs of the LAD services of those agencies. So I'm wondering, that politicization, should it affect operationalization and function such that it begins to compromise the very purpose for which they were appointed.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, the head, which also is the head of the body, as it were, if the body has 5 senses, you find 4 in the head. The body would only go in the direction of the head. And if you have a good head, then your 1 head is better than 5 heads. If you have a bad head, or a docile head, or a non-thinking head, then you have a big problem. You just be a big for nothing. So I think that when we talk about national security like this, certain times we don't do good justice to the sacrifices of the operatives themselves. Nigerian citizens, unfortunately, some people have to defend our own security, are dying every day. Policemen, military person, members of different agencies are dying every day, paying the ultimate price in defense of fatherland. There are 3 major issues here. One is a constitutional problem. The second issue is a resourcing problem. The third issue is a leadership problem. Let's give some kudos to President Buhari, because you can say he's been a bit aloof. But he's been aloof to a point where he allows the people under him to do the job and to build the collaborations. Maybe also he should be a bit more hands-on. Perhaps if he had more vision and clarity on what he wants to achieve in terms of security, and then you can begin to see that peculation you are looking for. Because the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is extremely powerful. If he has a true will and desire, he has the power to hire and fire. So, I mean, if you're not doing the bidding or achieving the results, it's very simple. You will be fired. So that's the issue of leadership. The second issue of resourcing. The people are not told. You can have all the whole interagency conversation, multi-agency, joint task force and all that. But if you don't give the people the tools that they desire and they need, they can't do anything. These insecurity issues will continue.
For you,
We have a landmass, sorry, I just want to land this. We have a landmass of above 920,000 square kilometers of land. When you talk about security, you talk about external, internal security. You then want to look at how cross-border crime, you look at the issues of even drugs. If we talk about national security, for example, you are looking at the intersection of human services, health services, public safety, and security services. Under human services, you're looking at humanitarian access. You're looking at access to food, shelter, to basic amenities and everything that just ensures human existence. And so the whole framing of national security is supposed to defend that framing of human access. So if the structuring, the resourcing, and the constitutional language for which the forces have been created is not clear, is not towards a strategic objective, there's no amount of conversations you have at the top. You continue to have those failings down below. Now, what is causing some of the issues is that the DSS is trying to be fair. They give intelligence. Sometimes they put out public advisories. They send intelligence to the police. They also share intelligence with the military. The police has FIB, which is the Force Intelligence Bureau. The states have the State Intelligence Bureau. The DSS has the intelligence they gather. The military has the Defense Intelligence Agency. We have the National Intelligence Agency, which are the people you don't see because they also have to do with external threats. Then you then have the DMI. So there is, the system is awash with intelligence. I dare say, you've heard Oga Mike, as I like to call him, my very good colleague, say that you have station chiefs in every local government, the 774 local governments you have in this country. But what the services don't have is that force multiplier that they need to curb and combat the myriad of challenges we're having. We are shooting at a moving target in Nigeria.
What's mitigating against that force multiplier?
The Constitution. The Constitution as it stands today. Until we bring ourselves to the realization of the fact that we need a state police. So military barracks are being attacked inside the states. The NDA, Kaduna with all its institutions and infrastructure of the military is being attacked. The military needs the police. The federal police needs a state police to be the first point of contact. And then they play the support role. We are not even dealing with the issues of cross-border crime, transnational crime issues, how issues in Chad, in Niger, in northern Cameroon are beginning to affect us and become our own problem, how the madness in the Sahel is affecting us. We are busy going from one incident to another incident. We are playing catch-up. So that's why I said if you are big and you are not thinking at the top and you are not correctly set up, you're just a big for nothing.
Mr. Adekoya, you mentioned a fairly long list of agencies just now.
Yes.
Do we need so many of them? Is it not because we have so many that their tasks are overlapping and then they clash with each other so often?
You see, deliberately, when you are set up for regime protection, it is in the best interest of the president, CEC, to have those deliberate
Overlaps.
vagueness, as it were, so that you can keep every other person checking himself and you don't have too much concentration of power. That's all palace politics. So every nation has its own, but maybe in the third world is a bit more announced, where you use different agencies to check each other agency. Okay, I don't really want to go into that. So, but we don't need them, because if you look at the functions of the DSS, the NIA, the DMI, you need them. You do need them. The police has to have its own SIB, the FIB, but the thing is interoperability. How are they talking to each other? What's the language with which they are talking to each other? What are the resources they have to support that communication between agencies? We have data, but is the data structured? Is the data structured in a language in which the military can use, the police can use, the federal safety can use? Who will be the custodian of the data? Now that you have data, how is data informing our national security policy? What are we doing with data? So there are a lot of issues.
And who is supposed to be using which data for what?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Ejiofor. In talking about these layers, permit me to use that term, layers of security agencies, because some of the agencies that you have not mentioned, Mr. Adekoya, includes the Road Safety Commission, the NDLEA, the customs, the immigration, and all these agencies. Even at this point, we haven't even talked about the police at all. But for these layers of security agencies that we have, Mr. Ejiofor, how do you see this, the connection? How should the connection go? Perhaps that will also help people to understand, because for those that you talked about the other time, the top echelon of the security agencies, they have an understanding of what is expected of them and what they're supposed to do. Maybe at the lower rung of the ladders in various agencies, they may not even know, that, okay, the road safety fellow is supposed to collaborate with the immigration fellow, who is supposed to collaborate with the customs fellow, and they find themselves in pockets of places together. And that's just talking about federal. How about the states? Where in Lagos, for instance, you have Neighborhood Watch, you have there's also the Civil Defense Corps. So in terms of collaboration, what's the network of activities supposed to be? Who is supposed to be doing what? And at what point do their functions overlap to the point of handing over to each other? Maybe that will help some people understand exactly what the issues are here.
I think our problems in terms of security approaches and coordination is basically not doing the right thing. At various layers, you don't expect to get results from a disjointed operation. But I want to refer to what Onyekachi said. And as long as we remain groping, all our security challenges will remain with us. Layers are that the problems are local. You localize every problem. Once the problems are localized, then you look for local solutions. Forget about all this synergy and all what we are talking about. If you don't have the correct input, you have the wrong output. Onyekachi mentioned, creation of state police. Let us be running away from creation of state police. If state police is not created, we will never solve our security problems. Never. People will tell you they have their shortcomings. There's no formation, there's no solution that does not have its own defects. I'll give you an example. Look at what is happening in Ondo State, for instance. Since the formation of Amotekun, you see the problem of kidnapping and all these things have reduced because they have local intelligence. And I've always used Ondo State, for instance, as a model to solving our problems. Only yesterday, I was reading in the newspapers the arrests made, even making breakthrough to the people who attacked the St. Francis Catholic Church in Owo. Again, this will bring a kind of friction because I was also reading, even though in the social media, police say they are not aware. The commander of Amotekun is issuing a statement. Over 72 people have been arrested. So I suggest that there must be synergy between our local security outfits and the regular security agencies. The only way we can achieve results, like I said, is for enough collaboration and synergy between these agencies. If you begin to take credit, one agency takes another credit, another one takes credit, we are not going to make any progress. And I suggest, if you look at the whole country, there's virtually no state that does not have its own state police under one name of vigilante or another group. So let the National Assembly begin to think towards creation of state police. And all these vigilante groups, like Amotekun, the regional security outfit, will form the nucleus of this security outfit or the state police. If we don't do it, we will not get results. Again, about 85, you recall, or 86, when General Babangida tried to look at solutions. If we don't get this thing done now that state police is becoming very difficult, I'm saying this because we're approaching an election. If state police cannot be created within this period, post people the rank and file of the police to their own geopolitical zones. It also has its own side effects, but the people would be able to know what is happening in their own environment. The citizens will have confidence to give or volunteer information. If you take somebody from Maiduguri and you send to Bayelsa, for instance, there's cultural differences, religious differences, no confidence of the people to come and volunteer information. They look at it as somebody from the north. But if you have people from Bayelsa, you post to Rivers, not necessarily their own state of origin, or you take somebody from Imo and post to Abia, you have the confidence of the people. They will volunteer information. And most of our problems will be solved. I think that's my take on that.
Mr. Dekoya, did you want to add something? I saw you raising up your hand.
No, absolutely.
Before I ask you the question about state police.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Oga Mike. Absolutely. Okay. Now, I want to talk about like you said, we keep groping in the dark. We fail to realize the linkage between the fact that we have not deregularized our mining sector with the incident that happened in Owo. We fail to also link that with the issues in Katsina, Zamfara, where you also have gold, because you have gold, you also in Owo. So if you had a fully deregulated mining sector where the states, can take full responsibility for some of these things, And some there's some political reasons for that, particularly oil and the rest. But we can't keep running away from this fact. The second part to this is that Nigeria is blessed with a lot of natural resources. But we keep playing the ostrich. The ostrich wants to hide, it puts its head in its own body and it feels it's secure. We are rich as a country, but we have wealth locked up in the land. The state governors in this country have all said they want state police from north to south. But the politics of it is that some state governors, like my maternal home state, Abia State, I hear is owing 11 months' salary. So how can Abia State add additional burden of state police? So some states can afford, majority of the states cannot afford. The states that have the civilian joint task force, what we are not being told is that, on good authority, some of them are paying those civilian JTF 20,000, 30,000 naira a month. You have armed somebody and you're paying him 20, 30,000 naira a month. Some are not even paying at all. So the politics is the governors, yes, they know they want state police, but they don't want to add the additional burden to their state budgets.
You don't blame them, do you?
I will blame them because if you look at what you have on the concurrent list, take, for instance, the politics in APC's primary. You can see how quickly the force of will from the governors of the APC was shown. All governors said it's going to the south, despite the fact that some in the presidency they stood their ground. If the House of Reps, the senators are from states. So if the state governors in Nigeria want to pass state police, the worst case is they will even override, the National Assembly will override the president. It will be passed.
There are those who also say, forgive me, Alero, for butting in. There are those who you will come back to your local government, the state government's question, but there are those who also say that we had local government,
native police
yes, back in time. And so one is wondering, you talked about this mineral resources and all
yes,
those things. They are in various localities.
Yes.
How significant is a collapsed local government system in all of these issues?
In fact, when people talk very ignorantly about the issues in Nigeria and they say there's an Islamization agenda, yeah, there are some people who have a warped ideology. Look at the north with its large swaths of land, the north. What we call ungoverned spaces are not ungoverned spaces, they are governed. Whether you govern it or not, it is governed because there are people there. Nature abhors a vacuum. I schooled in the north, lived in Maiduguri. I do business in the northwest. So I can tell you, in some parts of this country, you don't see the local government people until month end when they come to share allocation. So when local government presence is not felt, you are leaving room for chaos. Why was the native police collapse? Some make that argument and say you can't have the state police. We already have state police. We're just deceiving ourselves. How do you operate state police? Give them service pistols. Okay? License them to have shotguns. Let the Mopo squadron become the tactical special forces within the states to provide the support. If you are afraid of a regional uprising or a state uprising against the federal government, limit the weapons classifications that can be allowed to state police and remove certain high caliber weapons from there. You will get state police. What would that do? Force multiplier. When I go and deal with some people who are on hard drugs, who very soon from hard drugs will turn to crime, and from doing crime, they will go for illegal weapons in flow. If I can nip them at their hard drugs, and I can jail them, and we have a criminal justice system that is effective, I can reduce the burden on the military. I can reduce the burden on the federal police force just by having police in different places that are doing the right thing. Lastly, it is an aberration for you to see policemen carrying AK-47 every time. They are not approachable. In sane civilized societies, policemen carry service pistols. You can approach them. They can have their shotguns in the vehicles, they can call up for backup and the rest. But in our own state, we pay a man 43,000. We give him an AK-47. He should be working 8-hour shift. he's working 12 hours, 24 hours, 48-hour shifts, and he's carrying a rifle, and to keep his eyes awake, he's on drugs, he's on alcohol. We put ourselves in all sorts of peril. Why? Because we are not thinking about the Nigerian in the mix. So until the Nigerian security is set up to protect the Nigerian and the Nigerian state being our economic prosperity, our economic development, and aspirations.
My apologies.
Yes.
I know you want to land there, but
I've landed.
Isn't that the same thing? Mr. Jeffo, let me ask you that. He's essentially talking about more citizen-centric as opposed to state-centric security. Isn't that what was contained in that security policy come up with in 2019? One is wondering how come that's what we're still talking about this now, state protection as opposed to citizen protection.
There's no way the state can provide everything, even though the primary purpose of government is welfare and security of the people. The citizens also need to be involved. You can't say because somebody wants to come and kill you or harassing because government is not involved or the police is not intervening. So what I'm saying in effect is that our citizens must be involved. Our consciousness must be awakened. In fact, some people don't even know their responsibility to the state security service or the security agencies. How do you volunteer information? Some people even tell you, well, if I give information, I'll be arrested or I'll be exposed. If you're afraid that you'll be exposed, one day you become a victim. So I always encourage people to work with the security agencies. If you don't have a brother in the security agencies to give information, you have a relation, or you have friends, or you walk up to the station and look at it. In fact, you don't even need to go to, there are dedicated lines of all the various services. And I believe that now that we're going into campaigns, all the agencies, security agencies, should be publicizing, making it public, their dedicated lines for people to volunteer information. And I also suggest that, like what the NCC did, instead of giving long number of 11 digits, you see 999 or 199, so that people will be accustomed to this number and volunteer information. The military, the Nigerian government, the state government cannot do it alone without the involvement of the people.
On that,
very key.
On that, Mr. Ejiofor, quickly, speak to the depleted trust quotient between the citizen and the security agencies themselves.
Well, the deficit is there, but we cannot surrender, like I said. We must continue to encourage, and I also want to encourage the leadership of the various security agencies to continue to build that confidence. I take police, for instance, because police is closer to the people. How do you build confidence when you are driving on the road and you are being extorted? You are facing, you are running away from kidnappers, you are running away from armed robbers, you are running away from the police that is supposed to protect you. So it is the responsibility of the police to continue to build that confidence with the people by relating more with the people. I think the IG did something last week to had a training for the police public relation officers. So by such thing, you begin to organize seminars, build confidence at various local government levels, and then a state level, national level. If you don't have the confidence of the people, there is no way they can volunteer information. It's very key.
Okay. Well, Mr. Adekoya, you want to speak to that trust quotient as well? Because that's actually quite
in closing.
No, I mean, in closing, the people need to do more to appreciate what the members of our armed forces are doing. We're all Nigerians. They are paying this ultimate sacrifice. I mean, let's not allow the politicians force us into a negative standpoint, because if the armed forces lose the morale, and it can be very demoralizing if you're fighting and putting yourself in harm's way for a people and they're not appreciating. You know, that also can be. So on this side, I like to talk that way. We need to do more to appreciate the police the army and everybody doing it. And hopefully we can meet ourselves halfway, because the politicians are our problem. We are not each other's problem.
And the politicians are citizens themselves.
Yes, of course. Of course. Of course.
Oyekachi Adekoya, security consultant, as well as Mike Ejiofor, former DSS official and security consultant. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning. So we're back after now, taking another conversation when we return from this break. Please stay with us.